lack of power makes for quite a fun driving experience.
Yeah.
I always find a rental van one of the best things to drive.
It's kind of irrelevant as to, the financial element. It's just about this person loves a moggy and he's going to restore it and he's probably going to blow his brains out. But that's fine because he's going to love it and enjoy it and then use it and do all the things that, a proper car enthusiast should be doing. So, he only said Saab because he doesn't want everyone to go and buy 996s so the prices stay low so he can actually buy one.
Because that's how influential this podcast is.
Yeah. Hello everyone, hello chaps. Welcome to another episode of RM Sotheby's Car Show, and we have a new addition to the team, don't we? For this episode, we have Harvey Stanley, who
Hello.
Some listeners, stroke viewers, may be familiar with from your other job that you had before you joined RM Sotheby's, and you've been with us. How long have you been with RM Sotheby's now? Harvey?
I think it's about 6 months. Yeah, I joined in Monterey last year, so it feels like
Just feels a lot longer than that to the rest of us, but
welcome. I'm sorry. It's been such a drag.
And also we have Will Smith and Felix Archer, regulars on the pod. Hello, chaps. How are we?
Hiya. We're good. I'm in the office today, so there's people walking around, so bear with us. It's not the most serene of places to record a podcast, but...
well, we're all in the office, but we've all had to find a different room to sit in. I'm in the attic, you're in the office, Harvey's in the...
A spa, by the looks of it.
Yeah, it's the private sales spa and wellness facility.
Clinic.
And... and Felix is in the kitchen, rustling up a snack, no doubt. So, chaps, it's interesting. We're now on a podcast, but earlier today, we have been doing other video recordings for a completely separate purpose. And one of the things that we were asked to talk about was sort of highlight private collections, or single-owner collections that have been sold.
Yeah.
And one of the private collections that I'm sure a few of us talked about was what we call the Junkyard, the Rudy Klein collection in Los Angeles, which was a very, very large collection of cars, some of which were complete, some of which were almost complete, and some of which were very much not complete, including half a Lamborghini Miura. And that brought us onto the whole topic of barn finds. So we just thought we'd have a little chat about barn finds and the weird sort of micro market within the bigger market that barn finds represent. Because I think it's fair to say that quite often we're surprised by how much money somebody is prepared to pay for a car that needs a lot of money spending on it. So yeah, where do we stand on barn finds? Will, do you? I'm
a massive fan.
You're a massive fan, okay?
Because they're probably some of the easiest cars to sell at auction that you could possibly imagine. So, I've sold a few, and I think before we get into individual examples, I think it's interesting to talk about why people fall in love with them so much and why there is such demand for them at auction and why they seemingly sometimes sell for more than your average running example of whatever it is that's being offered.
Or
and
occasionally more than a fully restored, more than something that's just had a nut and bolt rebuild.
100%. And I think there's probably two factors at play. One is that the market is moving and valuing preservation more than it ever used to. And secondly, I think that the romanticism of a project, a bit like buying an old house, a crumbling old ruin, you fall in love with it because of its charm, because of its character, and because it's original. And you are the first person to get involved with either bodywork or engine work or whatever it might be. People love that sense of a car that is totally untouched as it left the factory, the original moth-eaten carpets. People love that kind of stuff because it enables them to make their own stamp on the car. And then some people will just gut it and completely restore it to brand new specification. And other people will do a much more sympathetic preservation style reservation, which, as I say, I think is more fashionable these days than it ever was.
But I think also it's quite a nuanced topic, isn't it? Because you've got a genuine barn find, so something that was abandoned in a barn in 1950 and forgotten about, and then is sort of rediscovered, and that's very, very exciting. And then there are cars where the backstory is really not quite like that. It's a car that sort of has just been rather neglected and not well maintained, and it's interesting that quite a lot of people, when you have a car like that, the choice is to actually put it into the auction room or present it for private sales or however it's going to be sold. Just keep the dust on it, keep the dirt on it, sprinkle a bit of straw on the seats, just give it more of a barn find feel. But I mean, I agree, Will. I think the fact that you are presenting a blank canvas is great. And I mean, Harvey, do you think? I mean, what would you do if you had such a car? If you discovered a car, would you take it to market as it stands, or would you get it into a restoration shop and get the work done?
Yeah, I think Will's completely right with his point on the romanticism of barn finds and restoration projects, and I think you're quite right on your distinction between neglect and preservation. And there are definitely instances where cars have been neglected and they've been mistaken for preservation cars. Once a car's been repainted, even if it's in its original colour, but once it's been repainted into another colour, the chances of you being able to restore that car back to its original paint, not its original colour, its original paint, are almost impossible. So I remember a few years ago we found a 275 in Switzerland. It was a right-hand drive car that the guy bought from London because it was really cheap. He said I couldn't afford a left-hand drive one, so I came to London and bought a right-hand drive one. Drove it back to Switzerland and then never really drove it. And the history file was amazing. There was all this wonderful paperwork in there. It was dark red originally, and there's a load of photographs of it in the 60s on the King's Road. And when I opened up the glove box, there was a piece of paper in there, and I opened up the piece of paper, and inside the piece of paper was his ferry ticket from 1977 when he'd driven it from London back to Switzerland, and the ferry ticket was wrapped in this little note, which was the handwritten directions that Danny Donovan had sold him the car back then, had written out for him to make his way to Dover to catch the ferry. I got super excited and I bought the car and we sold the car, but actually because it had been repainted to resale red and it wasn't its original dark red, and something else had been changed and the windows had been changed for something, actually, when you really got into the restoration, none of that stuff really mattered. But for some reason, the romance of it made, I probably overpaid for it as a dealer. The guy that bought it probably overpaid for it because he also enjoyed, he fell for the same traps, I guess, that I did. But ultimately, once it's restored and you sell it to the next guy, that's kind of all gone. I mean, those things are in the history file, but I think the reason auction works so well for barn find is in the auction environment, you allow people the ability to keep bidding, to indulge the romanticism. In a private sales setting, the price is the price. You either buy it or you don't. Whereas in auction, it gives people an ability to sort of indulge in that.
Definitely.
I think one of the interesting thing about barn finds historically, or sort of stuff that we would call barn finds, stuff that's been found and is totally original, is that there's a certain value. You get above a certain value, and it's economical to restore it, and you can try and make the numbers work. But what I find really interesting is the car where it's totally uneconomical, no matter how you look at it. And actually, the seller's in a bit of a position of power because you might have a Aston Martin that a restored car is worth 200,000. And you have the barn find that needs everything, that's going to cost 300 grand to restore, selling for 150 grand. And it's really interesting. But if that same person goes and restores it, it's not worth that much more. So it's actually a totally uneconomical purchase for a buyer, but it's just passion, and the sort of desire to preserve something.
One of the examples that I can think of we sold recently at auction was the Rudy Klein 300SL Roadster. Did you guys see that one at Miami? And they decided not to touch the paintwork or the interior or anything like that. And it took them 3 weeks. And they basically, Mercedes-Benz in Irvine in California, got the car running, put some lights back in, got everything working, and it's now back up and running. And just looks so distinctive and cool. And that's probably an example of one that probably didn't cost a fortune to restore, but you just went through it mechanically and the body wasn't rusty. So you just kind of dealt with something with great bones and it's totally unique. You rock up to a car show and something like that, and it's just so much more interesting to look at than another shiny 300SL Roadster.
Yeah, I think just circling back a little bit to Felix's point on value, I think because we're trade and we are we have to be interested in the values of these cars and whether it makes financial sense to buy it and restore it, etc. I think we always look at these results and go, oh, it doesn't quite make sense. Doesn't make financial sense for that barn find to make that much money. But I think what's so nice about barn finds is you end up back to where you want to be, where the bidder or the bidders are saying, I know it doesn't make sense, but I love the idea of it and I'm happy to do it and I'm happy to pay for it. And I guess in those situations, there are guys that aren't buying cars with an idea of reselling it for a profit or reselling it and getting their money back. It takes you back to real, almost like boyhood enthusiasm of wanting to be the guy that puts that car back on the road. And I think we all feel sad when we see a car like that off the road. So perhaps there's also an element of wanting to be the savior of these cars.
Totally.
It's true at every price point in the market, though, because if you found a rusting Morris Minor in a barn, it's going to cost. I mean, that's beyond the economic restoration as well. But I mean, because to do a really nice restoration on a Morris Minor, welding, paintwork, engine rebuild, gearbox, I mean, that's many thousands of pounds to do. And what's the nicest Morris Minor in the world worth? I don't know, 15 grand maybe. I don't know, but but it's not. We're not just talking about the exotic stuff. This is a topic of conversation throughout the market.
Yeah, but that's part of, and as Harvey alluded to, I think that's part of the charm of working in this particular sector is people buying cars for the love of the car, not for the financial implication of buying that car, but just simply purely because they were taken to school in a Morris Minor when they were a kid, and the smell of a Morris Minor is one of the most nostalgic things that they can think of, and they've always wanted to, so they've just, I don't know, made a bit of money, or they've just retired and they've got time on their hands, and they can restore a Morris Minor, and it's kind of irrelevant as to the financial element. It's just about, this person loves a Moggy and he's going to restore it and he's probably going to blow his brains out, but that's fine because he's going to love it and enjoy it and then use it and do all the things that a proper car enthusiast should be doing. So yeah, I
think it's really interesting as well when you come across the cars that have genuinely just sat somewhere for completely frozen in time. I remember just after we were opening up from COVID, there was a guy that rang the office and he said, I've got a DB6 Mark II Vantage, and I've had it in my garage since, I haven't even opened the garage since 1982 or something like that. I went there, and really nice guy, and he and his wife opened the garage up, and there was all this stack of newspapers bound together that he bought the morning of his last drive in the car. And just reading all the news, what was happening on the 5th of April when he did his last drive, with everything. There was still, the bits of clothing in the car. And it was just amazing, this sort of complete time warp that was just sat there. It was almost sad to roll it out in a way, to think, I hope this car never gets a new interior. I hope it's preserved.
Yeah, Will said sort of early on in this chat. I mean, there is a greater acceptance or a desire to own a preservation class car, and
Totally.
a simple. And I mean, I personally don't have too much interest myself in owning or driving something that, even if it's mechanically sound, looks absolutely awful. If you've got the horsehair coming out of the upholstery. I mean, I think for me personally, there's always a level of sympathetic restoration that I would want to do. But I mean, I think for too long the market was driven by the desire of our North American friends, who very much have always wanted the very, the better than new restorations. But now they've begun to bring, there's a preservation class at Pebble Beach now, and so that I think it's spanning the Atlantic as well now these days.
Yeah, I mean, best of show winner at Pebble Beach this year was Fritz Burkhardt's preservation Bugatti, and that was the first time a car like that had won Pebble Beach. So that kind of says quite a lot about where.
And the winner of Villa d'Este.
And the Villa, absolutely.
The winner of Villa d'Este was a preservation Alpha 8C. So
that in itself was both of the cars that you're talking about has given rise to quite a lot of heated debate, hasn't it? Because a lot of people, to win best of class at Pebble has been one of the things with these sort of big, magnificent sort of touring cars that have historically, GT cars that have historically done well. That's kind of underpinned a lot of the restoration business. People undertaking 5-year restorations on Mercedes 540Ks or whatever in order to win at Pebble, and the fact that demonstrably you can turn up with a car that's had very little money spent on it recently and win.
You can.
It's also a great joy for the entrants, because they can go and do the Pebble Tour, and if they pick up some stone chips, they can just laugh about it and go and have a beer. While everyone else is up at 4 a.m. polishing the cars. If you're entering a car in preservation class, it's a nice ride. It's an enjoyable weekend.
Yeah, totally. And I just think, for every 20 cars that I go and see, probably only one of them is truly original, like original carpets or original paintwork, and I just get more excited when I see something like that than I do the 20 other cars that have been repainted and retrimmed by someone who doesn't necessarily know what the original factory trim should have been like. So
with preservation, I think one of the reasons I like old cars, I hope it's the same for you guys, is because, like any old object, they tell a story, and they tell the tales of the owners that have been there before. Maybe maybe the kids put a scratch in the seat or whatever. And once you restore a car, you kind of restore you almost restore the previous owners, the lives that you very easily restore that history away into nothing. And with a preservation car, you can almost feel and smell almost the hands and feet that were there before.
Yeah, definitely.
Well, it's like an antique dining table that 3 generations of a family have dined at, and it's got all the marks and scuffs, and where one of your kids stuck a fork in it, and the last thing that you want to do with that table is send it off and have the whole thing completely repolished and made perfect.
Exactly, and it's a sensory experience. When you're dealing with a car that was driven by your father or someone else's father, it doesn't matter. But if you're holding the same steering wheel that they held, that has been untouched since all that time, there's something about that, or the same gear knob, or the smell. You'd mentioned the smell a minute ago, Harvey. I can tell a Mercedes, 80s Mercedes and BMWs, if they're original, just by the smell. Like, you get in them, and if they smell right, all the materials and the rubbers and kind of how that interacts with each other in terms of a smell, that is kind of, to me, what dictates a degree of originality to them. And so it's quite an important factor, really, I think, the smell of an interior.
So you're not into those like green Christmas tree things that you hang on your mirror that smell of pine?
I hate them.
Yeah, fair enough. That's fair. I haven't got one, just in case you're wondering. I was going to say that Felix is really the barn find expert because 80% of the cars Felix brings to auction are barn find.
Yeah, selling glorious restoration project candidates. I don't know. I think
Feeding the Aston Martin restorers their work. They love him.
Yeah, the blue plaque on my house.
So, okay, chaps. Now we're going to move on to our next topic, which is the greatest driver's cars of all time. Very contentious topic, perhaps. Have you guys been given
How many of
thought?
these? How many of these? I feel like every car you're about to list, you and Harvey have driven, and Will and I have not driven at all.
And no one else.
No, I don't think that's true at all. I can tell you right now, because one of the cars that I think may come up in conversation is a BMW E30 M3. Never driven one.
Oh, okay. I have driven a few of those, and they are remarkably good.
Are they?
Great balance. They're great. They're beautifully balanced. They've got great steering feel. They've got great suspension. They're a little bit underpowered by modern standards, but if you carry the momentum through a B road, through a twisty, they are so bloody good. And there's a reason why they were one of the most successful touring cars of all time, just because that chassis is just beautifully set up. Like, I'd still personally rather spank a E46 M3 or a six-cylinder M3 variant. But
yeah, they don't. I agree with you. They don't. They're almost like a Dino. They're a really nicely balanced car, but they just lack the power to sort of give you super bucket loads of excitement in a modern setting. But they are sweet.
Very, very sweet, and lovely size to them. You can position them on the road perfectly, and nice dogleg first gearbox.
Size is a big thing, because if a car's too big, particularly in Britain, on our roads, if a car's too big on a country lane, it's unpleasant because you're just constantly worried about things coming the other way.
I mean, you could argue that the best drivers' cars are just hot hatches, because they're kind of where everyone starts out in cars from a young age, and they're probably the most broadly appealing. I.e., most people have driven a hot hatch. Not most people have driven a Dino or a McLaren or E30 M3. But so like a 205 GTI or like my brother's 106 GTI that he had was my first experience in something that was genuinely powerful, genuinely fun, and I don't know. Maybe hot hatches are the drivers' cars that we should be speaking about.
Well, I think it's certainly got nothing to do with a price tag or how exotic a car is or how much carbon fibre it's got or how much horsepower it's got. I mean, and that's why people in their droves buy a variety of different sort of a Lotus Eliges and Exiges and Caterham 7s. They're certainly not, if you take a Caterham, for example, you're not buying it because it's a good looking car. You're not buying it because it's comfortable. There are more reasons not to buy one than there are to buy one, but people do buy them because if you've got a twisty B road and you've got to get from point A to point B and put the biggest smile on your face and probably, quite honestly, get there considerably quicker than you'd do it in an F40, it's all the car you need. So it just depends on what your motivation is.
Yeah.
I'm going to stick to my roots and say hot hatches because I mean, I still drive a hot hatch to this day, and it's got over 300 horsepower, and like that's sort of double what the hottest 205 GTI had back in the 80s. So it's like it's evolved a lot that sector, but there's something just sort of universally appealing about them that you can park them on the street, you can do your shopping in them, they're practical, you can put your kids in the back of them, and I don't know, compared to the stuff that we're lucky enough to get to drive sometimes, Yeah, I mean, a 27 RS is going to be an amazing driver's car and like has great race pedigree and everything else. But I'm not sure. It stacks up compared to some of the more popular hot hatches that we've seen on the UK roads.
I think a 27 RS is a great example of a great all rounder. Like you almost can't fault it because it's very good at everything. But as a result, I think you come away from that driving experience feeling maybe a little underwhelmed. You certainly don't come away from driving a 2.7 RS with goosebumps.
Yeah.
And I think when it comes to cars that great drivers' cars, sometimes I actually think a lot of the character comes from a car's flaws. So your hot hatches, maybe part of the reason you enjoy them so much is that they are intrinsically flawed. They're not the smoothest ride. They're not the quietest. They're not the most practical. I think an F40 is just the best thing ever to drive, but it's intrinsically flawed. Its brakes aren't good enough. It's incredibly noisy. It has no creature comforts. It's, you would not really want to drive one from London to Monaco. You'd be so fed up when you got there. But over a short sprint, it gives you goosebumps. So, to me, actually having a car that's flawed makes it more characterful and therefore better. And a 2.7 RS is almost too good. It's too good at everything.
Yeah, I think it also depends on your character as a driver, because I think a lot of people don't want to be scared or intimidated by what they're in, because it will actually just spoil the experience. So if if you do apply a bit of throttle in the wrong place and you've got some enormous turbo spooling up and it throws you into a hedge, I mean, exhilarating is one way to describe that, but the day's going to end quite badly, and I think that's for me, I think it's very analog, small, compact sized cars that don't necessarily kind of scare the life. I mean, I remember when I was a journalist driving a Diablo VT from London down to the south of France for a magazine feature, and just sort of really not liking it because it was just too big and it was too wide and it was too long and it had no vision, no rear vision or rear three-quarter vision. And although they're great cars to look at, I actually found being in one and spending hours a day in it was actually no fun at all.
Yeah, I'm with you on that, Peter. We haven't touched upon, like, in this country, obviously you got the fast forward phenomenon, right? So Escort Cosworths and RS 2000s and twin cams and the rallying connection with Ford Mark 1 Escorts and those are pretty amazing drivers' cars, because they were just, the people saw them win on rally stages and then they went and bought them on Monday mornings. Equally, the same for Subarus, the same is sort of like rally fever. And minis, of course, like won the Monte Carlo Rally and Mark 1 Cooper S. Like, loads of people have had those cars, and anyone who's driven one, it's still amazing how fast you can go into roundabouts and scare your passengers lifeless in terms of Mark 1 minis. And you see them still at Goodwood, like battling against Ford Galaxies that are like 7-litre engines. And it's just, I think there's a case for the Mark 1 Mini Cooper S to be one of the ultimate drivers' cars.
Fair point. Yeah. No. I mean, the less buttons and the less things lighting up on the dashboard for me, the better. I remember taking this is years ago, an R34 Skyline to the Nürburgring. It was just a track day, and the dashboard was like illuminated like a mid-80s hi-fi system, and and I didn't, it's got all of these weird dials and gauges, and it's giving you all this information, and I was in the car thinking, oh, what's going on? I don't even understand. I don't even know what that dial does. I don't know what it's telling me, and something's flashing at me, and those cars are so, all of those cars and Mitsubishi Evos, and there was a period when they were just getting so, anti-yaw differentials and all of these, really sophisticated driver aids that were coming in that made them so fast. But I actually, personally, I have no shame in saying I find all that quite intimidating. I'd rather not have it at all.
Felix, you've stayed pretty quiet on the subject of.
I think if it's
car.
just for the thrill of driving, not for a particular road trip where you're factoring in comfort levels, other people, road surface, all that stuff, climate, all this stuff. It's just 25 degrees, nice road with all sorts of variations of turns and stuff. For me, it's like I think you've got to have lightness, about 250 horsepower, naturally aspirated, linear power delivery, analog everything. That's like, for me, would be the ultimate. I appreciate that. Maybe it's because I'm far too terrified to the idea of driving an F40. I'm sure it would blow my mind, and I'd probably come away thinking that was the greatest experience of my life. But I think the fear of that makes me love the linear power delivery. Nothing too crazy, but involving. I think there's so many cars where on a road you can't get out of second gear because you're already going way too quick. So that's why it sort of goes back to the Caterham almost. I want to use all the gears and go back and up and down, and be involved with the car. I think lightness and lack of power makes for quite a fun driving experience.
Yeah,
I always find a rental van one of the best things to drive. Absolutely, I every time I get a short wheelbase Transit, I just think this is all anybody needs. And you're all laughing because none of you have rented a van recently. Go and get a Transit Connect. And I'll tell you what, Will, it reminds me of hot hatches in vans because they are because basically they're just metal panels, aren't they? There's very little insulation, and they remind me of 80s hot hatches.
Well, I mean, look at the market for 80s and 90s hot hatches now. I mean, I saw it's like a Clio 182 trophy. It made like 25 grand the other day on a online auction house. And I was like, since when did a Renault Clio become a 25 grand car? I don't get it. 109, 1.9 or 1.6 205 GTIs regularly making over 20 grand now. And it's like, the popularity that just seems to be growing ever further. And everyone said that about, the fast Ford market. And they were like, when they got to 50 grand, an Escort Cosworth, okay, then surely they're not going to go any higher than that. And now they're regularly selling for over 100 for an Escort Cosworth. And you're like, that's punchy. That's really punchy. But it shows the demand and it shows the popularity of those models and where they sit in the market relative to how many are out there. And yeah, people love a fast Ford.
Is the best group driving experience the Renault Espace F1, but if they could get the standard trim back in it?
Yes.
Well, no, surely by Peter's logic, it's a rented minibus.
Yeah, I mean,
with the Renault RS9 in it or whatever it is.
At Autocar back in the 90s, the editor, his long-term loan press car was a Renault Espace V6. Renault Espace V6. I can't be any more specific than that. It was absolutely amazing. We all loved it.
Yeah,
it was a quick car.
We should touch briefly on hot vans because we talked about the F1 engined Espace. They did a McLaren F1 engined X5 BMW. There's a great clip of Hans Stuck at the Nürburgring driving a Mac F1 X5. That's insane. If you haven't seen it, do go and look at that. But the first hot super van was the Ford Mark 1 Transit that had the GT40 engine in it.
Oh, yeah,
or was it a DFE?
They did. There was a Transit with a DFV, but they may have done one before that.
I think the OG was a GT40 engine Mark 1 Transit van, which is just outrageous.
There was an XJ220 Transit hybrid as well.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Right, chaps. So Harvey's had to leave us. I think he's got to go and see a client, or perhaps the kettle's boiled and he's run to pour it on his tea bag. I'm not sure, but anyway, sadly, Harvey's had to go. But just wrapping up on our drivers' cars, you've got one car to choose, one road, and you've got a day. You've got a day on that road and a day in that car. What are you choosing?
It's quite tricky, really. I mean, we actually went on this road not about 6 months ago, Peter. Do you remember the road that goes through Carmel, down Route 1 and hugs the coastline?
Highway 1, Big Sur.
Highway 1, down Big Sur, but coming north to south, so you're on the seafront side of the road. Yeah. That is pretty amazing bit of tarmac, that, and it goes on and on and on. I once did it in its entirety with some mates back in the day, and we weren't in anything special, but if I could choose something to do it in, I would probably have to say a BMW M1 Pro car that's been road registered.
Blimey. Okay.
There's a few of those out there.
Yeah.
There's a few M1 Pro cars that have, been retrospectively road registered, basically. And I think one of those would be a bit hot, but maybe in the winter.
It'd be so hot.
I just think M1 Pro car is one of the best noises of all time, and I don't know why, but I just that's what came into my head.
Well, I'm guessing that Felix is going for a Mark V Golf on the North Circular,
on the Nordschleife.
The Hanger Lane gyratory.
Yeah. Does the Nordschleife count as a road? Because it sort of is, isn't it?
No, it's definitely not a road.
You can go to Le Mans.
It's a toll road.
Oh, it might be. Oh,
technically,
yeah.
But that was because of insurance and people writing their cars off at the ring and then pushing them out onto the road and claiming.
We'll give it to you, though. We'll give it to you. Go on.
What car, though? You didn't say what car.
Quite difficult, isn't it? Because I would say it's a car that I haven't driven. But so I have no idea what it's like. Maybe like a 996 Cup car that's been set up for the Schleife.
For the Schleife.
What's like riding really high and very soft suspension.
Yeah.
Big 60 profile tyres on it.
Yeah.
You did the 24-hour Nürburgring, didn't you, Peter? Once upon a time.
I did, but not in a Porsche, sadly. Especially
in something far more dangerous.
Yeah.
Well, we survived anyway, so it obviously wasn't that dangerous. We all lived to tell the tale. But the Nürburgring, you can't beat that as a bit of tarmac, that's for sure. And there's no traffic coming in the opposite direction.
No.
What about you, Peter? What are you driving?
Do you know what? Well, you've kind of stolen my thunder, because going back to last summer and our little road trip on Highway 1, and I was thinking that the scenery is so amazing and it is such a long road. I mean, what you obviously want to do is completely dispense with all of the other traffic that might be using it. And then I just thought, well, if you're going to be there, you probably want to be in a 289 Cobra or something, don't you? And just to take the whole American dream thing. But you've chosen that, so I don't know. I'm probably going to have to end up on the Stelvio Pass or something in.
You're going to be in a yellow on yellow 968 Club Sport. I can see it now.
Oh.
Good choice.
That would be so good.
It's really good.
So good. When we were talking about drivers' cars, 968 Club Sport should have come into the conversation.
Yeah, it's one of the best. I have actually driven one of those, and it was one of the best cars I've ever driven.
Yeah, same. I was shocked. I did quite a lot of miles in one, and I just couldn't believe how how much feedback and how good it actually was. That is a car that definitely lives up to the hype.
I'll definitely be happy with one of those on the Stelvio Pass, or maybe a 430 Scuderia.
Nice.
Scuderias are good, but they make you drive like a complete dick. They kind of.
Well, who said I couldn't? I didn't know we had rules.
Oh, I know, but in general, they just egg you on. They're like, go on. I can do more. So you just hammer it, and it is a bit like a PlayStation experience because it's but up and down through the gears, paddle shift. But yeah, they are monstrously good and addictive things to drive. I agree.
Well, nice problem to have, quite honestly, and not one that I'm going to be having to tackle in the real world anytime soon. I'm going to be doing the A24 in a BMW 320d touring this evening, and I enjoy it every time. Every time I do it, I love it.
Great cars.
We're going to move on to another subject now. We're going to move on to future classics under £50,000 stroke euros stroke dollars. What do we think? I know where Felix is going with this already. I know.
You don't.
I've walked past.
You don't.
I've seen your browsing history too often to know where you. Okay. All right. Prove me wrong.
You don't. 2 years ago, I was with a friend in San Francisco, and he has a big car collection with all the exotic stuff. And he said, let's do a road trip. And he said, I'm going to give you the keys to what I think is the best car in this collection. And he chucked me the keys of a Saab 900 convertible, white with tan interior. And it blew my brains out.
Really?
Incredible. It was incredible. Also, everyone, I feel like, there's lots of cars that if I was seen getting out of, people would just think, twat. But I got a lot of love in that car. A lot of people going, I like that. And it said nothing about me. It just said, this guy likes his vintage kit.
Yeah. No, that's fair enough.
Would you go with a convertible rather than the coupe?
I mean, if I was in California all year round, yes, but no. But it's closely followed by the 996, closely.
Yeah, I knew we were going to get to the 996. We're going for, like, Guards Red 996 Carrera 2 with no options on it, circa £14,000.
Yeah, he only said Saab because he doesn't want everyone to go and buy 996s so the prices stay low so he can actually buy one.
Because that's how influential this podcast is.
Yeah. I'd like to give viewers, this isn't actually my choice, but latching onto the Saab theme, there is a car out there and you very, very rarely see them, and it's a Saab 9.3 Viggen. Have you ever seen a Saab 9.3? So the Viggen was the M-Power version, and so it was this. I can't remember how I had one on a like a week loan from Saab years and years and years ago. And well, this car got handed around the office. Various different people on the team were driving it. And everyone was going, oh, my God, have you driven the 9.3 Viggen? Because it was hilarious, because it had a lot of power and it put all of the power down through the front wheels. Yeah. And you've never experienced torque steer like it. So the front wheels just did exactly what they wanted to do. All you could do was hang on to the steering wheel and try and point the car in the direction that you want it to go. And if you eased your grip on the steering wheel, the car would just shoot off in a hilarious. And they didn't sell many because on almost every level it was pretty terrible. But I recommend to all listeners that they hunt down a 9.3 Biggin.
That is rare. That's not even something I knew they built.
Yeah, you're going to have to get onto Google. You're going to go searching for one. So, Will, what you buying?
You would think I would say Z3M Coupe, which, on some days I definitely would. Amazing little cars. I've had two of them, and over the years, and I've loved.
You're going to go Z4M. You said 4M.
No. So that's the Z3M. I think Z3M is my favourite because it just looks like no other cars that's ever been designed. But I'm not going with the Z3M Coupe, even though I love them, and I think they will be future classics. Already are semi-established modern classics. Now, I think you could buy a leggy one of these for 50 grand. So most are now over 50 grand, but I think you probably still just could find one. Alpha SZ. That, for me,
Can you get one under 50 grand?
Well, yeah, because if it's got miles and that 50 grand is what, 60,000 euros, they range from like 60 to 100,000 euros. I think you'd probably struggle, but I think let's just pretend that you could probably find one that's done, I don't know, 150,000 kilometers, but it's running like a Swiss watch. I saw one the other day. I did a little drive out from West London to a car dealer's lovely showroom in Oxfordshire, and one of the cars on the rally was an SZ Alpha, and I was just like, oh my god, they look just so weird and wonderfully cool. And there's nothing else that looks like it. V6, just weird, quirky, exotic, like super exotic. And yeah, I mean, a lot of people will say it's already a classic, but you just don't see them. And, I think they have some room to grow. But yeah, Alpha SZ.
Good pick.
Yeah.
Good pick.
Solid pick. Yeah.
Peter, what about you?
Well, I mean, there are quite a lot of sub £50,000 cars which I would really like to own, and I just think they're just such a great proposition. But they're not future classics; they just are classics. And I always come back to an early Alpha Spider because I just love them, and I just think, and they're so, why spend £1 million on a rare Ferrari drop top when you can go and spend 30 grand on a Duetto, and it's just a beautiful thing, and it kind of does everything that you need, and it's got a great engine and all the rest of it. But that is a bona fide classic. So when me and most of my mates were poverty stricken in our early 20s, we had one mate who had a proper job. That was because he didn't go to university, and he did the sensible thing of going and getting a job when he was 18. And so by the time he was 25, he was up and running. And he bought a brand new Mark 1 MR2 in dark blue with black leather, with the T.
The T bar.
The T bar, and it felt so exotic. I loved it. I loved it with all my passion, and you got in it, and it felt like a proper sports car, and it had a huge sort of transmission tunnel running down the middle with a little stubby gear lever, and I've always loved them. And you never see them. When did you last see a Mark 1 MR2 on the road?
They all got tracked, didn't they?
I think a lot. Yeah, I mean. Yeah, abused generally.
Abused, turbocharged, and blown up. And I actually had a friend who had a track one that was pretty rapid, like 300 plus horsepower, turbo, and he just binned it at Brands Hatch, and that was the end of that. So that's probably why you don't see them.
It's why I just want to. I want dark blue leather, and I just want it to be completely standard, and I'll be happy. I have no idea I don't know what you'd pay for them. Don't know.
I think they're coming up, but I think you probably get one for like 10, 15 grand.
Yeah. So there we go.
Yeah. Nice. Mr. 2.
Mr. 2. Mr. 2. Yeah. Didn't like the Mark II MR2. Fell out of love with it when that came along, but there we go. So, chaps, okay. Now we're getting into something that's going to be another contentious topic. The best looking car ever made.
Oh, God. Bringing out all the cliches today.
Felix is thinking 996 Carrera 2 Guards Red.
DB4 GT Zagato.
DB4,
Really?
yeah, can't argue with that.
No, I can. I don't agree. I don't
Really?
agree. Yeah,
What would
because
you
they
say?
all look different.
Exactly.
Well, I don't know if I don't know if I have. Yeah, I don't know if I have the answers, but
I think it's a better looking car. For my money, the classic Zagato DB4, which is rather, I think we would all agree, is somewhat 250 short wheelbase in appearance, is I think a better looking car than a 250 short wheelbase. That's quite.
Yeah,
Is that that's?
I'd go along with that. I don't know. I feel like something Italian. Lancia Stratos is up there for me in terms of just like design perfection.
Looks like a piece of cheese, but yeah, I agree.
it's pure 70s wedge. I'm not sure if it's the greatest of all time. I don't know. I'm sort of struggling here to.
You're not going E-Type Roadster or Miura or
No.
See, are we not saying those cars because they are the obvious things to say? Because if you asked everyone in the pub for an answer, they would be talking about those cars. But do you think that's the problem with those? Do you think they're just are we trying to?
I think it's a bit obvious in our line of work to say
Yeah.
a 250 GTO.
I don't think it's that good looking.
No.
Sorry, 36 owners or 39 owners or whatever it is, but it's just like, what is that? It's not even that good looking. Also, for my money, 250 LM.
Well, no, that's not a good looking car either.
No, it's like they've run out of ideas at the back.
I think an Alpha 33 Stradale is up there, like really up there. Like Stratos is like a kind of toned down version, perhaps, but like the 33 Stradale is just wild, crazy, doesn't look like anything else. We sold a couple, and they are quite something to behold in the flesh.
For a minute, I thought you were talking about Alpha 33 Cloverleaf, circa 1989. Yeah. Not one of them.
No, not one of those. No, a proper 33 Stradale, please. Because most people won't know what it is, which I think is even more endearing.
Yeah.
And they'll just be like, "What is that? It looks like a spaceship." And I think 33 Stradale would be quite up there, actually, thinking about it.
Okay. Well, no one's right or wrong on this, are they? That's the question. You can't, there's no right answer or wrong answer. But it's just one of those. It's a bit like deciding what you're going to do if you win the lottery on Saturday night, and what will you do on Monday morning? Apart from not come to work, obviously. But
I think I'd come to work, but I'd just be uncontrollably laughing
and being really rude to everybody. Deleting all your files, deleting CRM. You just wouldn't care, would you?
No.
Let's just put a different spin on the question. If you had to pick the best decade for car design, what would it be?
I think the 60s, because the design in the 60s were the cars that you saw in the 70s. So like things that you associate with the 70s, like let's say the Daytona Ferrari, that was designed in the late 60s, but everyone associates the sort of wedge shapes because that was when they were produced in the 70s, but they're actually sort of designed in the late 60s. And all the design houses and coach builders of the late 60s and even mid 60s, they kind of believed in young people and they employed young designers, and people like Gandini and Giorgetto and all these kind of amazing guys that designed all these incredible cars. They were like 21, 23 when they did it. They were actually little bastards. I don't know how they managed to do it, but they managed to do it all at a very young age. So I think that's kind of the most romantic era for me of car design.
Okay.
And no restrictions. There was no regard to safety, but they could use aluminium, and the post-war kind of, I don't know, depression of kind of things not being available was sort of lifted by the 60s. So you could suddenly use quite exotic materials again to build your cars, and you weren't scavenging around for basic provisions. But so yeah, I think something quite special about that 60s era of designers in Italy specifically.
Felix, what do you reckon? You on board with
90s?
90s. Yeah. It's a bit like your taste in music as well, isn't it?
I don't know. I just like the. I don't know. There's. I don't know. My favourite cars are quite often from the 90s, and that, you know, I think interiors were. I don't know. You'd get some really amazing interiors in the 90s, and you know, just some really interesting designs with, you know, and I don't know, the cars looked a bit more, I don't know, maybe more subtle in the 90s after the 80s. You know, sort of more wolf in sheep's clothing era.
No, I agree with that.
Yeah.
Peter, what about you?
I'd go pre-war for beauty, I think. Hard to say whether that would be the 20s or the 30s, but I just think that when, you know, that era of the great coach builders, building incredible bodies on, you know, Bugattis and Alphas and a variety of other, it was incredible, you know, and you know, and unrepeatable, and you can't. The world will never see their like again, and
there are thousands of them. You know, even in this country, there are hundreds and hundreds of coach builders that you could go and choose whatever design you wanted, and like it was the king of individualism and being bespoke and all that stuff that people strive for these days. In like, I heard Rolls-Royce are coming out with a new bespoke program where you can customize everything on your new Rolls-Royce. But that's just what they did from the beginning. That was the principle of the company, wasn't it? You buy an engine and a chassis, and then it's totally your choice as to where that engine and chassis go to be bodied and to your spec.
And you take a car like a 2.9 HC Alpha. Some of those cars are almost like Cruella de Vil style. If you gave a kid a pencil back in the day and said, you know, draw a fast car, you'd have this sort of, you know, big wheels and this really long bonnet and a little two-seater cockpit and a stubby tail. Yeah. Just amazing proportions. So
Good choice.
There we go. That's my two penneth. So thanks, chaps. Good chat. Enjoyed that. Thanks for joining us, everyone. You can obviously download this podcast from all your favourite places. Please please subscribe. If you'd like to see our wonderful faces, you can watch this on the RM Sotheby's YouTube channel. But thank you, and we will see you next time.
Cheers, everyone.
Thank you.